Welcome to the Parable Podcast. I'm Danielle Zapchenk, and whether you've been listening to the show for a while or this is your first time, we're so glad that you are here. Just a fun behind the scenes of how we record each episode is that I actually don't know what kind of parable the guest is going to be sharing. So I have all my preconceived notions are set aside, and I just really want to be present and jump into the conversation. So today you're going to hear some of my genuine emotion, which if you know me is not a big surprise, but just by being impromptu with what I'm finding out as the guest is sharing, it allows me and them to have some real talk and talk honestly about what things look like in our lives, even when it is hard and it's challenging. So just to make you aware, we talk about miscarriage today in our conversation. If that is a tender topic for you right now, you may want to skip ahead a little bit, but I do know that you're going to appreciate the honesty and the heart.
We had several miscarriages, and I remember thinking at a time in my life, at one point, like, God, why am I getting pregnant if I can't carry children? God, it was so difficult. And I might get emotional because no matter how much time has passed by, it's just something that it's just difficult.
I do know that you're going to appreciate the honesty and the heart in this conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear from Veronica Garcia. I am so excited to have my friend Veronica Garcia with me today. And Veronica, I believe obviously you are a gifted singer. I think you're an amazing mom. I think you are so strong, and I just love the way you carry yourself. I'm just very impressed every time I see you. So I'm so excited you could join us today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
All right. So Veronica, tell us, who are you? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So I am 45 years old. About 2 weeks ago, my husband and I celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo. We have 2 kids, a dog and a cat. Yeah, I'm just kind of living life. I'm a very busy mom, and I currently have 2 jobs, and I'm just busy, always on the go. But I'm excited for times like this when I'm able to just stop, pause, and just really reflect, because I think sometimes in life we just get so caught up in our everyday life that we forget to just stop, pause, and reflect about our parable. So I'm excited to be able to share that today.
Do you feel like you're always a person that has been busy, just wanting to do things? Because I think that about myself. I love just always having a list or getting things done, even before kids. Do you think that about yourself?
I think it's probably part of who I was as a child growing up, just because growing up, the way I grew up was different. My parents were 16, 17 when they got married, and they had 4 kids and very young age. And my father was very abusive. And when my mom decided to leave my dad, we lived in shelters for about a year. And then my parents eventually got back together again. And to this day, they are still married. But I think because of that lifestyle, Danielle, it really caused me to grow up fast and be independent. And because I'm an independent person, I feel like I always have to be busy. And so to answer your question, yeah, I think that's just who I am.
In the 4 children that you have in your family, are you the oldest? Are you the youngest? Where do you fall in there?
I'm the middle child.
So did you feel like you ended up being kind of a parent at times, or did you feel like you just didn't have a parent? Because I'm sure your mom at times as well wanted to be a parent, but because you were going through so many things, she probably just couldn't, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I feel like my parents definitely depended on me to help take care of my younger sister. My older brother was old enough to move out on his own. My older sister was never around. And so it was just me kind of always having to kind of help with my younger sister. And so that was, a challenge because I didn't really get a chance to experience my childhood how I would have liked to have.
How's that played a role as you are a parent of 2 boys and they're beautiful? I think they're so sweet.
Thank you.
How has that impacted you as a mom, as thinking about how your kids are going to grow up, knowing what you've experienced as a child and just shaping how you want to raise your family?
That's a good question. I feel like there are many times before I had children that because of how I grew up, I didn't want kids. I was like, I don't want kids. When I got married, it was several years later, we ended up having kids. And at the time I wanted kids, but I always said if I was going to have kids, I will never make them live the life or put them through the life that I went through, because it was hard. Oh God, it was so hard, and there are several times I can clearly remember till this day, Danielle, like incidents that happened just growing up, seeing how my father was. And I never, ever, ever want my children to ever see that. Both my husband and I, we work really hard and just learning to communicate with our boys, being there. We're very involved in their lives because I think it's important. That's something that I didn't have. And I think it's important to have that as a parent for a child. It's important.
My dad was a child who grew up in a very abusive household. And I asked him one time, I said, Dad, would you erase it all if you could? Because ultimately you think, yeah, I would erase it. But he said I wouldn't, because even as painful and traumatic as that was, that shaped him into the man that he is today. And I believe that because of our story, even in the broken places, God utilizes that and he gives us an opportunity to grow and bloom into something that he can use for his glory.
I believe that. As difficult as it was going through, I would never want to change it, because going through that helped me to see things the way I see, just to appreciate what I have, where I've come through life, and how I've just pushed through and have become the person that I really never thought I would become, and so I agree with your father.
Gosh, I didn't even know anything about that story already to begin with, so thank you so much for choosing to share that with me. So, Veronica, as you have had a little bit of time, as you said, to reflect, what is the parable story that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I guess it just kind of ties in with what I've already spoken about, my childhood growing up. And because I grew up that way, I've always been independent and never really had opportunities to go to school or to pursue things that I would have loved to have pursued, because my parents couldn't afford it. And because I was always having to take care of my younger sibling. But as the time went on and I got married, my husband and I tried to have kids. We had several miscarriages. And I remember thinking at a time in my life at one point, like, God, why am I getting pregnant if I can't carry children? It was so difficult. And I might get emotional because no matter how much time has passed by, it's just something that it's just difficult. I remember one of the last times I had a miscarriage, I just felt like I was wasting babies. I'm like, God, why am I getting pregnant if I can't carry this child? And it just hurts so much. I remember that night I had a really bad miscarriage and I was in the hospital. And I just remember coming home and just crying and crying and crying. And, I just prayed to God and I just said, Lord, if I'm ever going to have a child, help me to just have the faith to believe. Several months later, I had gotten pregnant again. And the third time, again, the doctors told me that I was going to miscarry. When you first get pregnant, they check your blood and they check your HCG numbers, and that determines how the baby's progressing. And because I was a high-risk pregnancy, I had to get them pretty frequently. And I had gone to the doctor, they checked my blood, and they called me that evening and told me that I was having another miscarriage. And I was so devastated. And I remember that night just crying myself to sleep. It was past midnight, and I dozed off, and I woke up and the name, Hezekiah David. I just woke up and that name was in my head. And I remember waking up my husband and asking him, who is Hezekiah David? And it was past midnight. He was groggy. He's like, I don't know. I think he was someone in the Bible. And so the next morning, I proceeded to thumb through the Bible and read up on who Hezekiah and obviously who David were. And I learned that Hezekiah was a king and that the Lord sent a prophet his way, telling him to get his affairs in order because his life was going to end. And King Hezekiah, turned his face to the wall and wailed and asked the Lord to extend his life. And then the Lord sent a prophet, the same prophet his way, and told him that the Lord is going to extend your life. And to me, I felt like that was God telling me that this child's going to live. I felt like I was just clinging on to anything. And the fact that that came to me, I just thought, okay, this has got to be God talking to me. And so a couple of days later, I went back to the doctor to get my blood work done again. And the doctors called me later on to tell me that my numbers had tripled and they went up and that I'm not having a miscarriage. And they just kept monitoring me. And I ended up having a boy. And I named him Hezekiah David. And he was a big boy. He was 9 pounds, 20 ounces. And it was just, I just thought, thank you, Lord. He's just so faithful, even when we're not. And, Hezekiah, he's, my rainbow baby. And both of my boys, they're just so amazing. When I was pregnant with Izzy, my youngest one, similar situation. The pregnancy ended up going full term. And Izzy's a bright boy. They're both fun. And I think through that story, through that experience in my life. I felt like I've always had faith in God, but I think you're really tested when you go through it, and when you go through it, it just seems so difficult. But when you look back at it, it seems so easy, and it was just so difficult. It's such a difficult time in your life, And now here I am, 14 years later. I feel blessed that I was able to be home with my boys for 13 years and raise them. And I think music has always been a big part of who I am. I've always loved music, and I've always had such a passion and just such a love for worship in general, music. And I think I never felt like, because of the life and how I grew up, Danielle, I never felt like I was enough. I never felt like I can actually be someone in the world and be successful at it. That was something that I really struggled with, singing in front of people. Like, am I worthy, Lord? Am I enough? Is this enough? Can I do it? And then when I started teaching last year during COVID, oh gosh, so many days I would just be in tears crying, like, am I enough? Can I do this? And it was really difficult. But I'm thankful for my husband that always encouraged and supported, and many other people that just always encouraged and supported me. And I had no formal training, and I think it's easy to give up and walk away. But till this day, I'm still just trying to figure it out. But I think where I am in life is someplace I never thought I would ever be. I didn't really know where my life would take me from my childhood. I didn't really know where I would go, but I'm still figuring it out. We all are, right? So yeah, that's my story, girl.
The crazy thing is, this morning, my reading was on Hezekiah.
Was it?
I'm just like, wow, okay, Jesus, okay.
Okay, Lord, got you loud and clear.
Yes. So whenever I think of Hezekiah, I think of your son first. And because that is the only Hezekiah I know. And I was reading that, and I did see that Isaiah, he came into him and he was like, try to speak to him, because there was, I think it was Egypt and Assyria on both sides. And it's just like this tiny little kingdom. And that's beautiful to know how that came, and like God used your dream to tell you, I have you, even though that there has been pain up through this moment, that Hezekiah is coming.
Yeah.
I also went through a miscarriage too. Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
We're just getting emotional here.
You know what? I know it's not easy.
Yeah. And I think for the longest time, it was between our two kids. One, I didn't realize the amount of women who have suffered. And it really just gives you a perspective to be so grateful for the kids that you do have, and to know that you have this understanding where you can now walk alongside other women who've experienced, other men who've experienced these same issues. And so, yeah, that was rough. And I do believe that you're going to have like a full football team once you get to heaven, Veronica.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
That will be fun. So I do think, like, for the longest time, though, I held on to the lie that for some reason it was my fault.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I just thought, okay, well, obviously it was something I did, or to be honest, like, I was taking birth control, I should have not have been taking that. And I remember telling the lady, because the baby was in the fallopian tube, and I'm like, can you just please move it?
Yeah.
And she's like, we can't. So, however, without that child, we would have never had our next son, Reed. So, yeah.
I always think about, I remember the first time I ever had a miscarriage. I was at the hospital by myself. My husband was working, and I was by myself, and I was in the ultrasound room, and the ultrasound tech was taking the ultrasound of my stomach, and she had a doctor that was learning, and he sat with her, and it was quiet, and it was a very quiet, somber atmosphere, because I had a feeling I knew what was going to happen. And the doctor that was learning was like, well, how come there's no heartbeat? I don't hear a heartbeat. And my heart sank so much, because he didn't know, but the ultrasound tech looked at him and was like, oh, don't say that, and I was just completely devastated. I remember going home and just grabbing it was a boiling hot summer day, and just grabbing a lawn chair and just sitting outside in front of my house in a lawn chair And my husband does not like the heat, and he does not like it outside or sitting outside. But at the time, he grabbed a lawn chair and sat next to me, and I sat there for hours, and he sat next to me for hours, didn't say a word. But I remember at one point, Danielle, I turned around and looked over at my husband, and he was sweating, like dripping sweat. And he didn't say a word. He just stood there. And to me, that is probably one of the memories that I have. And because I know he doesn't like sitting outside, but yet he endured that to be with me. And I feel like that's just love. You know what I mean? And sometimes you don't have to say anything. Just being there, just being present is enough. And I said, okay, babe, let's go in, because I could see that he was uncomfortable, but he had no intentions of moving. That is one of those memories that I'll never forget.
So you had said that you and Francisco had been married for 18 years, right?
Yeah.
Through the idea of marriage and just also what you imagine how you build a family, it is not how we imagine usually it goes. And it's hard. Marriage is hard work.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I think like marriage and even children, it's an investment. What you put in it is what you get. It's like 100% all hands on deck, right? If you just give a little, then, you might just get a little back. But, I think my husband and I, we've definitely had our ups and downs. But I went into marriage because of the life that I had growing up. And I told my husband, I'm not getting divorced. So we're going to deal with whatever issues we have. And, he had a rough life growing up, too. And so he was like, I'm on board. I agree. And so we've had hard times, and we've always worked them out, and we will always work them out. I don't want my kids to ever have to deal with parents that are divorced. And I know it happens. There's sometimes you just can't do anything about it. It happens in situations. I will always try my hardest to make things work because that's important to me.
Would you say that Francisco, he sees you and he is a champion for you? Like he just is for you all the time?
100%. 100%. In fact, you know what, Danielle? He's the one that actually pushed me to start my own little music school. He's the one that pushed me. He's the one that created my website, did all this stuff for me. And I was like, oh, but I'm not enough. I can't do this. I just, no, please, not me. I can't. I'm not capable. And he's like, yes, you are. You can do it. You can do it. And to this day, I struggle with those thoughts still. But he's always been like, Veronica, you are capable. You can. You are enough. And he's definitely been my support 100%.
Thank you for men like that who choose to champion their wife and love them and push them. I would say my husband does the exact same thing for me. That's how I felt about this podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it because I didn't think I was good enough.
Yeah.
And
why do we do that to ourselves?
I don't know. We
are enough, girl. We can do it.
Yes, that is true. Of course, we tell that to our kids, but why is that lie like in our heart? I don't know. So, Veronica, what would you say, since you talked about music a little bit, when did music become something that was really special? Do you remember like a first experience that you had with that?
I feel like I've always loved music. Music has always been a part of me. But it wasn't until I attended a church prior to Westridge, and there were some girls on the platform singing, and they were singing a song that that just ministered to my heart so much. And I just thought, wow, I want to be up there and I want to sing with them. I never really knew that I can sing. I just knew that I enjoyed it, but I never really knew that I could carry a note, or I knew nothing like that of the sort, And then I remember auditioning and getting onto the platform, and I think that was probably the time for me when I realized that I love music so much and I actually want to get up and sing, on the platform. So
you decided to start teaching while
during COVID. I like to live dangerous.
So what has that experience, being a teacher, heading back into school, what has that been like for you?
Oof, yeah. Well, I started last year, and when I very first started, I was in tears almost every day because it was just so difficult. How do you connect to these kids via FaceTime, via Zoom? How do you make that connection with every single student? And I ended up finding things to work for each student, like office hours via Zoom, connecting with them that way, doing just different games and such to connect with them. But now I'm in the classroom, which is so much better, but being in the classroom, you see the impact that COVID and not being in school has had on these kids. And it's so difficult. Most of these kids, I'm in third grade, most of these kids don't have the social skills, and it's sad to see. And it's very, very difficult as a teacher. It's very draining. I have to constantly renew my mind, and I have to constantly remind myself that I'm here for a reason. I find that I pray for these kids every day before I go into class because they need it, and they need someone that's going to be consistent and a consistent support in their lives because COVID has been very difficult on them.
What would you say has been the most beautiful thing that has happened that you've seen these kids express in the classroom?
I think the first 2 weeks of the beginning of the school year, I was in tears every day because I just thought, oh my God, these guys are going to get it. These third graders do not know how to read, do not know how to write. It's like, oh gosh, it's scary because they are depending on us as teachers to get them to where they need to be. And so I just feel like it was a dark tunnel with no light in sight. But here we are, the end of first quarter last week. And for me, I think the biggest highlight is a lot of these students have been so successful to see their growth, and just they write me letters every day. I come to school and they have, letters and little pictures and just tons of stuff that they give me because they're so excited that they've learned. They're so excited that they have been successful in whatever it is that they have been struggling with. And for me, I think that is just a reminder, that I'm capable. No matter how I feel, no matter what the situation is, I did that. I brought these kids to where they needed to be, and they did too, but they needed somebody that was patient enough and somebody that could just get to their level.
So you are also on the side, your side hustle.
Yes. Yeah, we all have one.
You are, would you say you're a vocal coach or a vocal teacher? What do you say?
That's a good question. I feel like, I have students that come to me that are active musicians out there performing, and they just need a little help. So in that sense, more coaching them, what are we singing? Let's work on that. But then I have students that are young that just want to learn the fundamentals. And so those are voice lessons. So I guess both, you'd say.
So on your website, I noticed it said, you talk about practicing, rehearsing, repetition. How do you think those three things, obviously they apply to music, but how do you think that applies to your faith?
Because I think it's important to be consistent no matter what it looks like, no matter how I feel, no matter what I'm going through. It is important to be consistent in my walk with God, even though it's difficult. And even though there's times where I feel so disconnected. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so difficult sometimes to find my way out of all the muck, But I think in the end, I'm always reminded that it is important to be consistent. It is important to give God my best, whatever that looks like, and I know that God won't judge me, but what I can give him, I know to him is enough.
Amen. It is enough. Well, Veronica, if people wanted to connect with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so for my business, Voice with V, they can find me on my website, voicewithv.com. I also have a Facebook at Voice with V, or they can always jump on to my regular Facebook and they can find me there.
Well, Veronica, thank you so much for just sharing about your life, the struggles with confidence, because I think that gives a sense of reality for all of us to recognize, we all have flaws. We all have things that are scary and hard, and for you to keep pursuing and following after God. I'm grateful for the time we spent together today and all the tears.
Thank you for having me.
Every time I do an episode and I have a conversation with our guests, I think, oh, I know this person, but do I really know them? And the truth is, I don't. I really want to challenge you and myself this week to make space for each other so that we can share, because it's so important in building our community. And so I love that idea that we really don't know people. We don't have the time to really understand and hear their stories. So I'm going to challenge you to that this week. Veronica and I talked about marriage, and I love being married to my husband, Eric, but I want you to hear this. I don't believe that it's a requirement for loving Jesus. Nowhere is there a commandment in the Bible that we have to be married. So wherever you are in life right now, know that the only relationship that should ever define you is between you and Jesus. So let's have some takeaway questions as we think about this conversation with Veronica that we can journal about and pray about and reflect over more. So first is this. It was so sobering to hear Veronica say that she felt like God was wasting babies on her. And there are moments when we feel like something is wasted in our life. So I just encourage you to have time in prayer, to have God give you some clarity and guidance, and know that your life is not wasted, but He is using it for your glory. You have this parable story for so much more in your life. So pray over that this week. Secondly, who is someone that is championing you in your life right now? And if you don't have that person, I would encourage you to not be discouraged, but to really think of it as an opportunity for God to bring someone to mind or place somebody in your life this week. Thank you so much for listening today. I have received some comments over the last couple weeks, and I am so grateful for the encouragement. One way that you can continue to support the Parable Podcast and future conversations like this one is by subscribing to the Parable Podcast wherever you listen, so you can be notified when every episode drops on Wednesday, and you can share this show with a friend. You have no idea what a real conversation means to someone. So just having a conversation around this topic is super helpful. If you have any questions or you want more information about today's episode, show notes are at daniellezapchenk.com. I would love to connect with you more, and you can find me hanging out on Instagram or Facebook at Danielle Zapchenk. That is Zapchenk. That'll do it for today. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Remember, your parable, it showcases how your life is not wasted, and God, He is so faithful. I'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.